All right, awesome. So we're transitioning now into the third part, which is so super exciting. And it's really all about how to win people to your way of thinking. But it just goes so much deeper than that, which is just ridiculously exciting. So I'm super pumped for you guys. This stuff is super awesome. So let's get right over to the computer and let's just start to make it happen, because this is like dreamland right here. So key concept number one, you guys freaking know this, is you can't win an argument. I mean, it's just straight facts. You guys already are pro here, but this is a really cool story. So shortly after the close of World War I, Dale, he learned an invaluable lesson one night while he was in London. And he was the manager at the time for Sir Roger Smith, and the two, they were working together, having a fun time. And during the war, Sir Roger, he was an Australian ace out in Palestine, and shortly after peace was declared, he astonished the world by flying halfway around it in just 30 days, which is pretty cool. He flies halfway around the world in 30 days. Like, that's cool, man. He must like flying. He did like flying. He was a good flyer. He was a good pilot. And no such feat had ever been attempted before, and it created a tremendous sensation. The Australian government awarded him $50,000, which at the time was basically like $150,000 through 200-ish. And the King of England knighted him for a while when he was, the most talented man under the Union Jack, which is like super cool. I mean, he just became ridiculously popular because of this cool little stunt he did where he kind of flew around half the world in 30 days, which is just cool. At the time, like that was massive, right? The war just ended and everyone was like globally unifying, which is like super cool. And as they're attending this banquet given in Sir Ross's honor, during dinner, a man sits down next to Dale and tells him a humorous story which hinged on the quote, there's a divinity that shapes our ends. Rough who? And this guy, he mentions that the quote was from the Bible. And so they've got like this big dinner party. They're all celebrating their buddy Ross, and they're just having a great time. And at the time, Carnegie, he wasn't as connected with his social skills. He wasn't as developed. He didn't really understand these concepts as much, which, whatever, right? And so he realizes that this guy's wrong. That quote, it's not from the Bible. I know that. I know it positively. There's not the slightest doubt. He appointed himself the unsolicited and unwelcome committee of one to correct him, because by correcting him, correcting other people, what it did was it gave him a feeling of importance, and it let him feel like he was significant. It gave him superiority over this guy who was just trying to tell a story, right? And what's super crazy is he sticks to his guns, right? Because if you criticize people or you tell them that they're wrong, like they're gonna stick with their guns. He says what? From Shakespeare. He says, Dale says that was a quote from Shakespeare. You're wrong, which does so much good, so much greatness for everybody. And what's really interesting is like he keeps defending himself, saying it's absurd, and that the quote was from the Bible, and he knew it even though it's kind of wrong. And the storyteller who was sitting on his right, Frank Garman, old friend, was seated on his left. And this guy, Garman, he devoted years to the study of Shakespeare. Like Shakespeare was his thing, and he knew that, this is a Shakespeare quote. And Dale knew that he knew that. And so he asked the question, he asked Mr. Garman, he said, hey, is this from Shakespeare or the Bible? And this guy kicks him under the table, kicks Dale under the table, kicks him. And he said, Dale, you are wrong. This gentleman is right. It is from the Bible, even though, he knows and Dale knows that it's not from the Bible. And then Dale said, and on the way home that night, Dale says to Mr. Gammon, Frank, you knew that quote was from Shakespeare. And he says, yes, of course. Hamlet, Act 5, Scene 2, blah, blah, blah. But we were guests at a festive occasion. Why prove to a man he is wrong? Why prove to a man he is wrong? Is that going to make him like you? Of course not, right? It's going to alienate you from other people if you keep telling them that they're wrong. And so often, like when I was growing up, I would do this thing where I would like try to always correct people and tell them the facts and tell them, try to like be the smartest guy or whatever, right? You never want to be the smartest guy in the room. Like that's a bad place to be. And the minute that you can surround yourself with smart people, you start to get pulled towards their level of growth, achievement, intelligence, whatever it is. But like correcting people, it feels really good. And I know that because for years and years and years, like I would always love to correct people and tell them that they were wrong and tell them that I was right and give them reasons, blah, 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 blah. And I felt amazing, but I had no friends. Why did I have no friends? Because every time I hung out with people, I would just correct them. And if you have people correct you, like, you feel like crap, like it sucks. And so if you do need to overcome a challenge, you need to maybe correct somebody, you have to do it so gently, or avoid it at all costs, because let this guy save face, right? Like, why not let him save face and let him have his public opinion? He didn't ask for his opinion. He didn't ask for Dale's opinion. He didn't even want Dale's opinion. So why the heck even bother arguing with him? And always avoid the negativity, avoid arguments, avoid criticism. And this was a lesson that like Dale never forgot, because not only did he make the storyteller uncomfortable, but he put his friend in an embarrassing situation too. And how much better this entire situation would have been if he just wasn't argumentative. And like, just arguments are terrible. Now I understand, like, sometimes you need to like tell somebody the facts. You need to be like, hey, this is what's really going on here. And it's cool, but you need to do it in a much calmer way. So like, for example, I was at this mastermind meeting like a couple days ago with some options investors, and they're just doing phenomenal jobs with algorithms and just crushing options. I've been doing really well with options, and continue to do really well with options. It's just a lot of really awesome investment figures, facts, and learning from each other, right? Which is like super cool. And at this meeting, what happens is it's pretty interesting. So we all sit together, we're chilling out, and there's like a big whiteboard, and I know I always love that meetings with whiteboards, because it's just so much easier to explain yourself. So we're talking about options and technical analysis, which has just freaking changed my life. It's the coolest thing ever. And this one guy, he's like, isn't RSI and stochastics the same? And I was pretty much the only one there who had done extensive trading in technical indicators. Most of these other guys, he was into more of financial modeling. He was into more the algorithms. And then this was kind of more like general, like hedge fund investing, kind of basic fundamental stuff, not as deep into the technical. It was more like long-term stuff. But like, I'm doing everything, right? So I got like long-term investments, swing trades, 9 to noon trades, all that fun stuff. And so I kind of have like the most experience, out of all these guys. Maybe they've been trading, tops, a couple of years. I've been doing it probably like, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years, something like that. It's just like not a big deal. Like, I just kind of like, I know my shit, right? And so he's like, isn't RSI the same as stochastics? And I'm like, because like, what you don't want to do is you don't want to say that's wrong. You never want to say that to somebody. But like, RSI is stochastics, and I go through this process, and I'm like, it kind of depends. And I say, it depends. So you've got, maybe stochastics. I mean, this is everything we teach in the 9 to noon members area and the book and all that stuff. But I'm like, stochastics has crossover points, and it's an oscillator for sure at 80-20, just like, RSI. But RSI, I mean, it could be a 2-period RSI, or it could be like a 14-period RSI, and it just kind of depends on the time frame you're trading, right? And this is going to be really volatile, versus this being maybe a little bit more like the stochastics, but it's different because it doesn't have this, red line or the black line, which is, the moving average of the traditional trajectory line for the actual indicator, right? It doesn't have a 3MA. And it just trades differently. And you guys know, as you go through 9 to noon, as you go through the members area and you start to make your first investments, like, you guys know that, like, RSI and stochastics, there are stochastic RSI, but fundamentally, like, they're not, they're different, and they have different uses, and that's why, they both have sort of like their own chapters or different sections, and I mean, they're different indicators, they use different mathematical equations for a good reason. They do different things. I have to kind of explain to this guy and to this whole group, like, this is how it works, but you have to do it in a respectful way. You have to do it in a way that's like, not only like respectful, but it allows, the other person to save face. You want them to feel like they're really smart and they're really important. Remember, you want to put them up on a pedestal so that they feel like they're above you, even if you're explaining something to them that they might not understand. And so that's sort of the goal with this situation. It was a tough one, but you just have to make it happen. You got to stand back. You have to say, you know what? I'm not going to say you're wrong, right? And if it wasn't a big deal, if this wasn't, investments are kind of a big deal because, you're dealing with like cold hard cash. And so like these investments, they have real impact on the marketplace. And I've been making a ton of bank, they've been making a ton of bank, and for everyone to succeed, especially with like an investment committee or some sort of team or a group where you're investing together, like you need to sort of be just a little bit hypocritical of other people and it's one of the few situations I think investing is where you want to sort of find the flaws, because you can find the flaws in a bad investment, you can avoid a bad investment, that's going to save everybody money. And it's better to be truthful and honest about if there are potential problems than it is to just kind of, jump on board and say, yes, you're right, I agree with you, of course, which is what you should do in most social situations, because it usually doesn't matter in social situations. With investing, you kind of have to show people what's up so that they can, not lose a bunch of money and make a bunch of money, right? So, cool stuff. And Dale kind of learns that in this situation. He realizes that being argumentative, it's just not the way to go. It's just not the strat, not the goal. It just does not make sense for him, for his family, for his community, for his business partners, for these people that invited him out of the kindness of their hearts. He doesn't show respect for them, which is a shame, because it's not his domain to argue with these people. It's not him. It's not him. Now for Dale, it was solely a needed lesson, because he had been an inveterate arguer throughout his entire youth. And every time he would just constantly, I kind of did this too, it's just kind of funny. He would just argue with his brother over and over and over again about everything in the whole world. It was just insane. Went to college, he literally studied logic and he studied argumentation. He went to debating contests solely for the purpose of arguing, and so that's what he was predisposed to, both in his family and in his formal education. Like everything he did was about arguing, which is just like ridiculous, right? And so as he does this, he later grows up and he's talking about arguing, he's debating, and he taught debating classes, and he's kind of ashamed to admit it, but he wanted to write a book about arguing. But since then, he's listened to, engaged in, and watched the effect of thousands and thousands and thousands of arguments. And he realizes that there's only one way to get the most out of an argument and to really get the best out of any situation. And this is something I wish I learned so long ago. The one way really is to avoid it. To avoid arguments, avoid confrontation, and avoid it as you would avoid rattlesnakes, as you would avoid earthquakes. 9 times out of 10, an argument ends with each of the parties more firmly convinced than ever that they are absolutely right. And there's a huge radical separation, a huge divide between the two. And I've experienced this so often, and it's terrible. These negative emotions, this awful sense of being. And this is how I used to be so often with my brother, the mom. It's just awful. And the only way to really have any kind of happiness and joyfulness and cheerfulness is to just freaking avoid the argument in the first place, right? And just be happy. And it's just such a powerful concept that I just wish I knew so long ago, because it's so many pointless arguments, because you cannot win an argument. You can't win, because if you lose it, you lose it. And if you win it, you lose it. Suppose you win and triumph over the other person and shoot their argument full of holes and prove that they are wrong. But what happens next? You're going to feel amazing, but they're going to feel totally inferior. You're going to hurt their pride, you're going to hurt their face, and they're going to resent your triumph. And the only way to have that lasting effect on someone really is to avoid all this argumentation, avoid all this crap, and instead get people to see your actual way of thinking and to see where you're really coming from. And that's really the point of what this segment is about and what this section is about, is getting people to see your point of view so that they work with you in the long term. And you eradicate the arguments not through talking through it, but in reality by shifting someone's way of thinking over to your way of thinking and to winning them over as friends, so that you don't have to have the arguments in the first place. Because the best way to have sort of any of that success that you want, and to have the most fulfilled, happy, joyful, and prosperous life, is to avoid all arguments in the first place. And the beginning might be difficult to do this, especially if you're in a tough situation, a tough family situation. I used to be in a tough family situation, really, really bad. But the moment I started applying this and really tried with all my might to avoid arguments, just stop. If you're arguing with someone on a regular basis, just stop. Move on and have the achievement, the fulfillment, the success that you desire in your life on your own terms, because really that's all that matters. So thank you guys so much. Hope you got a ton of value from this module. Go out there, apply it, absolutely crush it, and I will see you in the next module. Thank you. Bye.